We are continuing in today's Mishna Yomi. Today we will be learning Maseches Peah, Perek Gimel, chapter 3, Mishnayos Dalet through Hein, Mishnayos 4 through 5. Mishnah Dalet says as follows: Ha'imos Shabbatzalim Chayavos bePeah. Literally, again, the mother onion. The mother onion is chayav in peah. Now, what's the mother onion? So the Bartanura explains over here: Bitzalim Gidolim Shamanichin Osan Lagadol Zera. This is an onion that you leave in the ground in order to create seed. Now the Bartanura says, because they're left in the ground for a longer amount of time, that it often renders them inedible. Now they could be consumed under duress, all right, or they could be consumed in extenuating circumstances. But it's not normally something that you would consider to be edible. Nevertheless, because it is technically edible, hadchak, in difficult or extenuating circumstances. Therefore, the Tanakama, the first opinion of the Mishnah, says that it's chayiv in peah. However, Rabbi Yossi poter. Rabbi Yossi says that it's poter. Rabbi Yossi's logic is, since people don't normally consume it, therefore halacha lemaisa, they won't be chayiv in peah. Mother onions won't be chayiv in peah according to Rabbi Yossi. Good. Malbanos habzalim sheben yarak. An interesting case. What happens if you have rows, or actually the way it's better translated is not as rows, but they translate it as squares. You have patches of onions in between, in a vegetable field. So what's the halacha? Rabbi Yossi Omer Peah mikol echad ve'echad. Rabbi Yossi says that essentially we look at these as independent squares, and therefore halacha lemaisa, you have to take peah from each and every patch. The Chacham say no me'echad al hakol. Now the Chachamim have an interesting idea. The Chachamim say that halacha lemaisa, in this type of field you have onions and vegetables. So the Chachamim consider to be the onions the ikar, the primary item, and the vegetables the tafel, the secondary item. And the reason for that is because since the onions last, right, you could store them and they can last for a longer amount of time, and vegetables cannot. Therefore, again, the onions are primary, the vegetables are secondary, and therefore, again, the Chachamim hold that you only have to take one peah for the entire field. Good, interesting Mishnah. Mishnah Hey, Mishnah number 5. Ha'achim shechalku. So an interesting case. Here you have a following situation. A father passed away, and now his sons inherit his property. So what happens as a result? Now let's say the brothers divided the estate. Once they divide the estate, then halacha lemaisa nostin shtei peos. They have to go ahead and give two different peos. In other words, each brother gives peah from his portion of the field. Chazru v'nishtatfu. What happens if halacha lemaisa, the brothers go ahead and rejoin their interests? Now, interesting enough, what happens over here is they split, but then they decide to go ahead and rejoin again. Nostin peah achos. Ultimately, again, since it remains as one field, they're only obligated to give one peah. Beautiful. Similarly, if you have two people who went ahead and jointly purchased a tree, it's only chayiv in one peah. However, let's say one person purchased the north part of the tree, the other person purchased the southern part of the tree. Then ultimately, again, each of them will go ahead and give their own peah from their own defined part of the tree. In other words, what you begin to see is as follows. When people have independent defined ownership interests in something, they each have their own peah obligation. But once those ownership interests are pooled and to a certain degree indistinguishable, then halacha lemaisa, one peah suffices. So when the brothers divide the estate, each one is chayiv in peah. They repool their interests, one peah suffices for all. Two people buy a tree jointly, one peah. One buys the northern side of the tree, the southern side of the tree, two different peahs. Hamocher kilche ilan b'soch sadeu. This is an interesting case. If you look at the Bartanura, he says mocher kilche ilan. So kalach literally means a stalk. So it sounds like he's selling a stalk of a tree. What does that mean? The Bartanura says, Shashet tzmachim shechayavim bepeah v'lo machar lo hakarka. So the case over here is, if you could imagine, you bought a sapling, or I should say, Reuven sold the sapling to Shimon, right? So Shimon goes ahead and purchases a sapling. So what happens? But again, Shimon didn't purchase any land, just the sapling. So what's the halacha? No same peah mikol echad ve'echad. Ultimately, again, each purchaser, assuming that again Reuven's selling off his sapling, so each purchaser of a sapling has to give peah from his sapling. When is that so? Emasai Bizman shelo shir bal hasoda. That is only if Ruvain the seller did not go ahead and retain any saplings for himself. If you look at the Bartanura, Bizman shelo shir kilomar imlo hischil bal hasada liktzor or lilkot peros. So the Bartanura explains, if Ruvain the seller himself did not go ahead and begin to harvest any of the fruit in the field, that's when the purchaser will be obligated to go ahead and give Peah. However, the Mishnah concludes, Avalim shir balasada no sin hu Peah lakol. But literally, again, if the owner left some of the saplings for himself, then halacha lamaisa, he will have, the owner of the field will have to give Peah on the entire field. The Bartanura explains, but if Ruvain began to harvest his field, so Ruvain retained some of the saplings, and remember, Ruvain owns the karka, he owns the land. So if he began to already harvest the saplings prior to going ahead and selling to others, then halacha l'maisa, he will have to go ahead and give Peah for the entire field. The Bartanura explains, because the moment that Ruvain, who's the owner of the field, begins to harvest, that's when the Peah obligation is generated. And because he generated that obligation even before he went ahead and he sold anything, therefore the entire Peah obligation for the field rests upon him. Wonderful. All right, we will stop over here for today. Shkayach everyone. Tomorrow, we will continue with Mishnayos Vav through Zayin. Wishing everyone a wonderful day.